I definitely think showing up before the book drops is essential. You don't want it to be like, now it's go time. I better
Mm-hmm.
learn this and start. I think that if anyone listening has the goal of writing a book at any point in the future, then start now. Start small. Start with what feels reasonable.
This is Unknown to Known, an on-cam ready presentation. I'm Jamie Maglietta. Thanks so much for listening or watching wherever you are. If you're enjoying these conversations, do subscribe to the channel or follow us on your podcast platform of choice. It means everything, especially if you take that extra step and leave a 5-star review. Oh, those are golden. Here's something nobody tells aspiring authors. The idea is not enough. Before a literary agent finishes reading your pitch, they're already Googling you, just like a TV news producer, which I talk about often on this show and my other podcast, Think Like a Producer. Today's guest knows exactly what they're looking for because she's the agent. Sally is a literary agent, and she also has this incredibly detailed Substack. If you're an author and you are interested in becoming a traditional published author, you need to be on this. I mean, she is great with all different types of publishing routes, and we'll talk about those in this conversation. But as a literary agent, she's connected to traditional publications. And in here, she talks about the behind the scenes of this latest book, The Lao Kitchen. This was a fantastic Substack. And I just love how much detail she's offering on the pitch, on the analytics behind what the author had going for them online. And, it's just really compelling to hear her take as well as see the results of what this author, put in before publishing the book. So definitely check out her Substack. There's a link in the description. I'll make sure we also bring that up in the conversation. Her Substack has over 7,000 subscribers as of this recording, and her agency has placed authors with Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, and more. You can connect with Sally again. I mentioned her links are in the description. Today we're talking about pitching, publishing, platforms, the 3 Ps. She's also going to bring up a serious topic: what happened to her online, how she was hacked, and the significance about why she will skip your pitch if you use AI. Here's our conversation. Sally, this publishing world, man, it has changed dramatically. Why don't you just tell people a little bit more about your story? I've let them know that you're a literary agent, but you have a very unique beginning with your mom and just tell me a little bit about that and let the audience know who you really are.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jamie. I have been an agent specializing in the cookbook space for 17 years now. But I really grew up in this industry. The original agency was called Lisa Ekus Public Relations. So we started as a PR firm, Lisa Ekus being my mom. And then we've evolved in the agency and our offerings over the years. And now our core focus is on literary representation. So representing authors for their book publishing opportunities. And it became the Ekus Group. I became the succession plan. This was not the intention for me to work in the field or what is now the family business. I was on a different professional trajectory, moved home, started helping out, realized that I really loved this work, and it's been sort of like part of my education through osmosis and then specific mentoring. And Lisa retired a few years ago, and I merged our agency with another long-standing agency called JV in LA that's based out of New York. And so, yeah, I grew up in and around culinary media, and I was raised by a publicist, so we can talk about what that looks like. And now I get to continue to do this work on behalf of authors.
I love that. And I like that story too. I have a friend who she is going to be the successor of her mom's, PR firm. And it's so cool to have that family business. I keep hoping that for my children. I think it's great. And it's
Yeah, I mean,
good that you can continue the work. Yeah.
I think one of the reasons it feels so comfortable and welcome, I think Lisa would say this as well, is that it wasn't the original plan. Early on
Yeah.
in her career, she wasn't thinking necessarily, I want my girls to go into this. And so it was really self-directed and a choice that I had, which made it so lovely and to step into it. And also once I started being mentored as a literary agent, I realized how much I had innately just learned through being around the industry, and that sort of added a level of, historical knowledge that I'd like to think helps me stand out in what I do day to day now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, guys, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see there's like stacks of books
Lots
behind
of books
her.
behind me. Yep.
You also should be checking out her Substack. On your Substack, what I love, and I'm trying it this week. I did it. I was like, dear readers,
Oh,
just
yeah.
because I love the Bridgerton series, so I
Yeah.
don't know where you got your idea from, but it
I
just made
don't
me feel more personal. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm starting my draft newsletters, I'm like, "Is this from Bridgerton or is this just part of how I write to the world?" I don't know. Yes, I have a Substack called Not So Secret Agent where I share nonfiction publishing information and insights about the book publishing world through my lens as an expert in the cookbook space and in my immersion in the publishing world day to day.
Mhm. And this publishing world, man, as I was
Yeah,
saying, it has
it's a
changed
doozy.
so much.
Yeah,
Selling a book is hard. Landing a deal is hard. And
yeah,
everyone always asks, what do I do? There's so many scenarios. So I hope in this conversation we can kind of dig into a little bit of that to help people understand the realities
yeah.
and the direction to potentially take. But before we get into that, for someone sitting at home right now with that book idea,
hmm
what might be the first step you would recommend they take to kind of try to land a deal?
Yeah, there's a moment that I think is part of the
Mhm.
perspective an author or like the evolution that an author goes through getting ready to write a book, and it goes from this internal focus, I've always wanted to write a book, to an external need in some way, some sort of demand from your audience, from the public, from the marketplace. And really, it's that evolution that starts to reflect an author's readiness. And part of that evolution is starting with like sitting at home and being like, I've always wanted to write a book. And then
Mhm.
asking yourself, well, what would that book be about? And why am I the right person to write that book? And then what other books are out there meeting a similar audience or meeting a similar reader, and what other books are covering similar topics, and what do I have to add that's similar to that conversation and adding to it in a nuanced, unique, really clear, differentiated way. And from a logistical standpoint, there's a couple different things that people can do to try to test the waters of how ready they are, or if their book or if their idea and their goal is best served in book form. Because a lot of what we talk about in writing a book and in book form is an evolution of like this bigger portfolio of work at large. So a book might be one channel in which you're sharing your expertise, a podcast might be another, a newsletter might be another, teaching and speaking engagements might be another. And often it's all of those things, and a book is missing as part of that portfolio. So here are some questions to ask yourself and some specifics that people can do. One is start with some comp research, like what are the books that are out there that are covering a similar topic or speaking to a similar audience? And the audience might be a related topic like I love baking, and so I'm going to talk about specific types of baking information or a technique. And I like to do good old fashioned comp research at my local indie bookstore. So I
Mhm.
often give people the homework of going into your bookstore. And if you don't have a relationship with your local indie, great time to start one. Because if you do
Mhm.
publish a book in the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years, you're gonna want to know your local bookseller. There's a lot to learn in that store. So you go in and you go to the section that you think your book would be published in, and you look what is on that shelf. Who are those authors? Are they experts? Who are those publishers? Who are the imprints of those publishing houses? And that's the little icon on the bottom part of the spine of a book. Those are the imprints, which is like a subsidiary or a smaller brand of a larger publishing house, unless it's an independent publishing house. We can get into all that. Um, who are you can look at the agents often acknowledged in the back of the book. Who are those agents? How do they like to be queried? What other books do they represent? Research is a huge part of becoming an author, whether that happens tomorrow or 2 years in tomorrow. So that is a very practical first step that also can really help inform one of the sections that eventually goes in your book proposal. And in
Mhm.
nonfiction, you sell a book proposal, you don't sell a manuscript. So it's different than in
Mhm.
fiction. And in nonfiction, the book proposal is the business plan for your book, and doing that initial comp research ultimately helps inform what goes into your book proposal.
And for those that are new to all this and you're
Yep.
writing down all your notes, like, just remember, when I have this one episode where I'm talking about podcasting and also how to determine if you're bookable for the media. It's all
Yes.
very similar.
Hmm.
Like, bring out that Excel spreadsheet. I mean, you tell me if you would suggest otherwise, but I always say, like, put all the titles maybe in the Excel, the
Yeah,
authors, look up, what is like a phrase that seems to be common or a theme in the book, and then really strategically identify your uniqueness within your niche of the
exactly.
books similar to you, because that's going
Yeah.
to really help you stand out. And these book proposals are long.
Yeah, they can be a doozy. And the book proposal process really reflects the book writing
Mhm.
process. It can be
Mhm.
long and hard, often is. In cookbooks, there's sample recipes, sample writing, things are tested, and it's really that business plan for you and why you're the right person to write a book. And going back to your original question as well, it's similar to like being bookable. It's like being discoverable. Most of the
Mhm.
time, people are ready to write a book when I go searching for your name and a topic in a specific conversation, and you are front and center, like either leading that conversation, starting that conversation in the center of that conversation. Like that is the difference between someone who has a passion and somebody who has an expertise. And that expertise is what often leads to authorship.
So, what you just said is golden for me and this audience, because I'm constantly saying if you're not showing up in the
Yeah.
right places online, you are going to struggle to stand out as the expert within your niche. And the relevancy needs to be there as well as the digital footprint if
Yes.
you want press, if you want stages. And what she's saying, guys, is if you want books.
Yes. You got to
So,
be bookable to write a book.
and on top of that, you have to be able to sell the books.
Yes.
And there are over 4 million books published annually in the US. That alone, to me, I was like, wow, that's an incredible statistic. But a book can really help add legitimacy and authority to that expertise that you're talking about, if you're already in that position, that spotlight. So, what do you think? I mean, when it comes to the traditional route versus indie versus self pub, you're a literary agent. So, I'm sure I can guess where you suggest people lean. But what's your take on
Yeah.
where people should go for a level of like visibility they have?
Yeah, so I work with traditional publishers, and that's the
Mm-mm.
big 5, but also many independent publishers.
Uh-huh.
However, s because I've been in this world for so long, I have sort of like these eagle eyes trying to determine when someone's querying me, every now and then I'm like, "Maybe they should explore self-publishing, or maybe they should
Mhm.
explore a slightly different route." And there's
Yeah.
a number of different considerations and factors that lead to me asking that question to them or helping them decide, and I usually, though, all of the considerations fall into these like 3 categories, in my opinion, as to whether or not somebody should self-publish or traditionally publish. And those 3 categories are, the first is financial. So in traditional publishing, you'd be offered a book deal, including an advance and a royalty structure. So the publisher is offering you some sort of payment. It's
Mhm.
usually in many parts, and there's a lot of nuance that we can get into there. In self-publishing, you're funding your project in some way. So the financial considerations, there's a lot of nuance in that bucket, but let's just call financial one bucket. The second bucket is control. And I use a bus analogy for this. So
Mm.
in self publishing, you're the one driving the bus. And you might even be deciding, like, when you're opening that door and you want to let a few experts in, like how to design your book and copy edit it and print it. But you are in control and you're making the decisions. And most of the time, when people have a really robust and clear brand and they are not interested in a level of compromise that traditional publishers will require, self-publishing can be the right call for them. And
Mhm.
it's a completely viable and really appropriate option for a certain type of person. And I use control in like the best sense of the word, because there's a lot of control that you give up or you compromise whether you self-publish or not, but it's just a matter of like how you approach making those decisions that can help determine which path to go in. So, and for traditional publishing, you are very much on that bus. You're even like right behind the driver, kind of like tapping on their shoulder, maybe guiding them where to go. But ultimately, someone else is driving that bus. And so that control bucket encompasses a lot of things in the publishing path. The third is distribution. And so in a traditional publishing deal, it is your publisher's responsibility to get that book into people's hands. They have different distribution relationships and means of
Mhm.
doing that, and they're the ones that are printing the book and distributing it to, in many cases, a global audience, depending on the publisher and all of that. In self-publishing, there's a real wide spectrum of distribution opportunities, and some are a little bit more thorough than others. And so there's a difference between saying your book is available and distributing it. And so many times, an author doesn't want to be the one packing and shipping their books out of their garage or maybe their retail locations. That may make more sense if they have a means to distribute and sell their books. So there's a lot of nuance in those three buckets, but those are generally speaking the three buckets. And I, as a traditional literary agent, worked with traditional publishers.
I would say the trad pub, the hybrid, and the indie, like the self pub. And when I'm looking at the strategies, if a dust jacket is important to you as a listener, it's very hard to get if you don't go with a traditional publisher from what I'm seeing. And hybrid can be very much an expense, or from what I'm seeing, you give a lot of your IP even in a hybrid situation on the with the royalties. So
Yeah.
you may not be paying as much, but you're not going to earn as much either. So there's a
Yeah.
lot
And
of things to look at. Yeah.
And with hybrid, there's a real range of companies out there that offer services, but the specificity of what they deliver is really important to dig into. And so for hybrid publishing, I would encourage people to check out the Independent Publishing Association, I think is the
Mhm.
acronym IBA, because there's a list of qualifications that you need to meet as a hybrid publisher to sort of do right by the clients and the authors that you're publishing.
Mhm. And then it also comes down to if you are listening and you're like, I really want to see my book in a bookstore. Well, you may not if you self pub or go hybrid. So there's also that to think about. But is it a guarantee that even at
I would
like a traditional
I was just
pub
gonna
you
say,
can get in? Yeah, I feel like
even with a traditional publisher, it's not a guarantee that your book is gonna be everywhere. It depends on the size of the
yeah.
publisher, their distribution relationships, and also sometimes it
Mhm.
takes time. You might be somebody who's helping open new accounts for that publisher because your book is appropriate in the special store account down the street where they sell two different types of books, but they're not a traditional bookstore. And so it's really an evolution. And I think everything kind of just comes down to asking, what kind of process are you looking for? Like, do you want
Mhm.
somebody to have as a sounding board who knows the industry and can explain, here's the pace in which these things are expected to happen? Of course, there's always outliers. Or do you want to sort of forge ahead with, I know exactly where and how I want my book to get out into the world? And that's really
Mhm.
appropriate for some people. And most of my clients know exactly what they want their book to look and feel like and how they
Mhm.
want it out in the world. And they're looking for a traditional publishing deal.
Yeah, and I used to essentially HarperCollins would send us books at
Yes.
Fox News Channel. We had a relationship, and I would do a lot of the interviewing of the authors. We'd do cooking or fashion,
Yeah,
whatever the segment needed to like get attention around a certain book. And so I would have thousands of books at my desk.
I bet.
And I one day I brought them all to Atlanta after living in New York, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I have a whole bookstore.
Yeah.
I donated them to this charity that was selling books. But in the process, I realized maybe only 2% actually made it on air. And it made me want to ask, like, when you're dealing with a traditional publisher, they have a publicist.
Mhm.
But again, like the press isn't ultimately guaranteed
Right.
unless the author is doing something on their own.
Well, I was gonna ask you what stood out to putting those 2% of books on air.
Well, I will say this, like, sometimes the pitches just miss the mark.
Yeah.
I was looking my show, I was filling commercial breaks, so essentially before social media,
Yep.
1 minute to 3 minute segments,
Yeah.
and it really did depend on if they were speaking to my audience, which was
Yep.
global. They
Uh-huh.
had some evergreen to them,
Mhm.
draw. of an
Yeah.
angle or a topic, but also the author was relevant. That
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean a celebrity. It could mean
Right.
someone who is a thought leader, quoted in magazines,
Right.
has op-eds,
Right.
someone who's just relevant to the media cycle. So
So
yeah,
that's
it was just how does
that's
that yeah.
exactly what I look for, right? In the
Mhm.
proposal, I'm looking in your press section to see are you a
Yeah.
thought leader? Have you been covered places? Are you bookable? And those are the
Mhm.
things that it's not like, okay, you're not, so it's past forever. It's, hey, here are some things to work on because if your book came out tomorrow and nobody knows who you are, nobody's going to be able to find your book, right? Like you
Yeah.
have to be out there, and out there can mean a lot of different things to different people. Like not every, some people's skin is going to crawl thinking about cooking for 3 minutes on TV. Other people are like, put me in, coach. I'm ready to go. Here's my
Yeah.
hero plate, right? So I represent all kinds of personalities and some are more mediagenic than others or some have different media preferences, but it's looking for that that 2% or that bookable
Mhm.
concept, evergreen, trend based, zeitgeist,
Yeah.
teaching me something. Those aha moments come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and that's what I look for on the proposal side as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And the one question I get a lot, even though, I don't work in the author space, but because of my background,
Right.
there's always that assumption. Now, I'm very knowledgeable, right? But I'm not a literary agent. I'm not a book agent, guys. So let's be clear. I do help people market themselves so that they are more bookable, which ultimately can help them.
Yes.
But the one thing they ask me a lot is there a follower count or an engagement threshold that you kind of look for as the make or break? Like if they're, or it doesn't even matter these
Yeah.
days,
So
really.
as you can imagine, I get this question a lot, and all agents have different opinions. Like there are agents that you'll
Mhm.
talk with that say, I'm not going to even entertain this unless you have 100,000 followers or 500,000 followers. Um, I am not that agent only because I've always represented some pretty like niche small things. And by nature, those don't always have the most enormous audiences. However, that threshold comes from a certain statistic in the industry, which is that somewhere between 1 to 3% of somebody's audience is going to convert to buying their book or buying their thing, whatever their product is. And so it's a numbers game. The more people you have, the bigger that 1 to 3% number is. And so when we're looking at books as a business, publishers are
Mhm.
saying we're pretty risk adverse. We want a sure thing. There's never a sure thing, but the bigger the audience, the bigger that 1 to 3% is. Certainly, the tides have shifted or evolved over the past few years with a ton of creator led books and also the endless changes in the algorithm. So what that looks like now is
Mhm.
engagement or real reciprocity and this like feedback loop with your audience. And for some people that might be a follower count, but for more and more of the conversations I'm having when I scout or when I'm talking to editors or when I'm talking with current clients, what is your newsletter list? What is the relationship you have with your local media? Can you call them and get a segment once a month because you're their go-to lifestyle expert? That's great.
Mhm.
That's very different than saying, I need you to have 500,000 people on Instagram. It depends
Yeah.
on your topic. It depends on your goals. It depends on so many things. And so do I like a huge follower count with a high engagement rate? Absolutely. Is it required for my representation? No.
Yeah. And I was looking at Query Tracker and it was saying, that agents receive between maybe 1,200 and 2,500 queries a year. A year. Like, how do you get through these?
Yes. So I'm kind of lucky because I'm so hyper specialized. I almost exclusively do cookbooks. I also do a
Yeah.
few books in the nonfiction space, like in parent and caregiving, and prescriptive nonfiction. But generally, I'm known as a cookbook agent. And so by genre
Mhm.
specifications, my query amount is lower. I think last year maybe it was somewhere around 500 queries or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, my colleagues who represent across genres might get 8,000 a year, and it's not,
Wow.
you can't get through all of them. You have to have some sort of um filter system, or sometimes people are closed to queries to catch up. I usually try to review and at least confirm that I have your pitch in my inbox within a few weeks, and then try to get to it within like 6 to 8 weeks. But that is changing the more volume I get. And also, my list is quite established. So I'm not looking to sign, the number of new clients that I was 10 years
Mhm.
ago.
And, to add on to that, if people are thinking, well, I don't have an email list or I don't have many people that I'm engaging with, a small following, if it's engaged, can still be effective. It may
Absolutely.
not be yeah, like,
I just
so we should.
signed somebody who has a very small social following and a very niche topic, but they're an expert in the thing that they're pitching me, and they were discoverable online when I searched for that. And it wasn't like I needed our expectations around I love a book that knows exactly who the audience is for, right? Like I know
Mm,
exactly who this is for, and I know exactly who should publish it. That's great. We don't need mass numbers. What we need is the right quality of contacts. And that's what this person was coming to the table with.
yeah, and I completely understand. Like, I was working with, a few people and they're trying to map out, what's my social strategy to get people on board to want my book. And I'm spending a lot of time on Book Talk, and I realize, Book Talk has driven over 20 billion views under that hashtag on TikTok. There's
Hmm.
also books of Instagram and authors of Instagram, guys, if you're listening and you're not a TikToker. But if you aren't a TikToker and you're thinking about writing a book, you should be showing up there because the journey, the behind the scenes of writing the book seems to be very fascinating. Do you have any tips for people on how to like start showing up and building that audience before the book drops?
Well, I definitely think showing up before the book drops is essential. You don't want it to be like, now it's go time. I better
Mhm.
learn this and start. I think that if anyone listening has the goal of writing a book at any point in the future, then start now. Start small. Start with what feels reasonable. I will say that anecdotally, I had a client whose book caught something in the social algorithm, and a year after it was published, it made the New York Times bestseller list because it found word of mouth, it
That's
found
so
its
fun.
audience, and then it found social to the point that it just like caught in the way that it needed to. And so it's never too late. And
Mm,
supporting the long game of
mhm,
publishing, whether it's starting with, okay, how do I just pitch one type of media, right? Like, how do I engage
mhm,
Jamie? Like, how do I work with you to help raise this one part of my profile that then helps me raise the next part that then
mhm.
informs how actually I want to be talking about the thing I'm really passionate about? Because
Yeah, and it's so
yeah,
true because you need that outreach in addition. I think
yes,
it's more than the legitimizers. Like national news is going to give you a really good legitimizer. I don't know how much it's going to sell your book, but it's going to
right,
help you with awareness.
right.
Local TV can really help you bolster up your follower count. I've heard many people say like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't expect it. I was on KTLA or whatever and I got a ton of followers right as I was getting off air." Like I
Right.
couldn't believe how fast the conversion was on local versus national. So you want to be strategic with your placement. And I constantly tell people, like, don't be so hungry for, GMA because those local markets could be your bread and butter. And the
Absolutely.
the one thing we did a lot at Fox was we had satellite tours. And I did a few, one
Yeah.
was with Newt Gingrich and the other was with Mike Huckabee. And, I just remember them off the bat. They were so good at these book tours and it was with every affiliate. So you're going all around the
Oh yeah, I
country
love an
from one
SMT.
location and what was great about them is they weren't appearing as I'm just the expert, I'm selling a book. It was
Right.
like every time they would get an affiliate, Mike Huckabee would be like, "Where are they located? Minnesota." He'd be looking up what's happening in Minnesota. And
Exactly.
then the anchor would come on and he'd be like, "Well, I heard about this happening in Minnesota. If you want, I'll give you a point of view on that before we get to my book." It's thinking strategically. And
Yes.
even as a cookbook author, you could be looking at when you do get that press, I always say, when you get that press, your relevancy to that audience could be about like, oh, I saw that there's this huge gluten-free trend in this city. I'm going to go to this, I'm going to strategically position myself to get a book
Yes.
on this local market so I can talk about my gluten-free cookbook options,
Yeah.
in
What
my cookbook. Yeah,
what you're
go.
talking about in terms of that, like, personalization of
Yeah.
positioning
Mhm.
is gold.
Gold.
I cannot overstate how helpful that training is for people in life, but all like, especially in authorship, and thank you for your service, and please keep doing what you're doing, and everyone should hire you, and like, it's
All
true.
about
I mean,
positioning.
it's
It's
really
so true.
helpful to think strategically and market by market. Like, you don't sell books by the thousands, you sell them one by one.
One by one. And that point you made too really got my wheels turning about so there's so many people that have these local gigs where they're like, I'm just on my local market every other Saturday talking about X, but that doesn't help me because my book is on Y. And I'm like, how doesn't it?
Right.
That's your funnel. So
Yep.
if you're a doctor and you want to write a cookbook on healthy foods and they keep booking you on the local market as a medical professional to weigh in on stories like COVID or whatever the topic is of the time, keep that up. Because when the book drops, they're then going to want to book you on your book.
Right.
And then they'll start introducing you with the book title, and that's going to help. I mean, that's my strategy. I always tell people, like, think outside the box.
Yeah, and it's a business of relationships, and
Mhm.
and it's a business of meaningful networking and follow through and professionalism, and those
Yeah.
things, there's a lot of noise, and if you can cut through the noise with a clear pitch and great training and positioning and longevity and drive, expertise, great. I love that stuff.
Yeah. We got to talk about you though, because you're on the other
Do
side
we?
of the pitch, but you've also built your own platform. You're leading by example in my eyes. The Not So Secret Agent newsletter on Substack, we mentioned it, but I really think it's important for our audience to truly understand you have such an online consistency where you're providing value and it's not salesy, right? But you're elevating your brand awareness, which could ultimately attract clients and help your clients in the long run. So what made you turn to Substack and what advice do you have for others that are looking at it?
Well, thank you for acknowledging the newsletter. I started the newsletter I mean, I was raised by a publicist, so it's like in my blood to share what I know.
I have to
And
communicate.
I was really blessed with this hyper mentorship from Lisa and
Mhm.
access to the industry right from the jump in my career. And so I can give all the information. It's really a matter of what people do with it. So I am trying to share it forward. And the newsletter is a place that I get to try writing a little bit and sharing about my life and my experience as a hyper specialized agent. And all of it's not salesy because there's nothing to buy. there's
Mhm.
all of the information is free. The only um benefit or like paid readership tier is access to these industry skill building sessions that I run.
Mm.
They're like craft sessions for more 2.0 information. And truly, the only reason I paywall them is so that there's a little bit of friction for somebody to say, I'm ready for that next step. And I have endless equity spots that I comp people into that community. So the paywall is for yeah, again, just like somebody to be ready to make that step, but the financial barrier should never be in play. So people can email me or send me a DM on Substack and you can have an equity spot, no questions asked. And that's been again from the jump. So hopefully the reason it's not salesy is because I'm not selling anything there.
But it's also your time too. So when you're
Oh,
doing
it's my
those
time, and also
workshops, yeah.
the guests that I bring in, I compensate them. There's an honorarium, and
Mhm.
paying people for their expertise is part of my ethos as an agent. And so I'm in no way suggesting that it's entirely like unfounded on financial values. It's just that yeah, there's a lot of publishing information out there, and I have one very specific expertise and knowledge base, and so it's an honor to share it with my readers.
But you're also not gatekeeping, and that's
Right.
what's
Yeah.
appealing. So, at
Yeah, I
least
mean,
for
there's
me as a reader, as someone who is engaged with you on Substack, I think, yeah, it's you're not gatekeeping.
I mean, there's nothing really to gatekeep because
Mhm.
like I said, I can give you all the information and it's not all there, but I'm trying to share, like, this is how you get an agent. This is what an agent does. Here's what goes into a book proposal.
Mhm.
Here's how I sign clients. Here's what stands out to me about clients. Here's
Mhm.
how this book came to be. I can give you all that information, but until you go and write your pitch and do your homework and, find 6 media placements and build your community, you're doing the work, but you're not doing the authorship work. Like you're building towards
Mhm.
authorship. And so it's not I've got nothing to gatekeep. It's, take it and run
Yeah.
with it.
And what she said, you're finding your 6 media placements, right? Guys,
Right.
just go to her Substack, look up, there's tons of links, tons of resources if you really wanna dig into becoming an author, do a deep dive and research on her Substack. It would be wrong of me not to bring up AI. So I just need to bring it up.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you not? It's changing so much of the book industry. Are you seeing more authors use AI as part of their
Yes.
strategies and how do you identify I guess like
It's
is it okay
actually,
to
I
use for a
mean,
proposal?
what?
Is it okay to use for the proposal but not for the book? I'm trying to figure out like how do
Um,
you use it?
there's a lot to say about AI. One thing is that because I share all of this information transparently online, AI has used that against me and
Oh.
impersonated my voice. And, author scams are really common. And I was recently impersonated using language that I actually share in interviews and transcripts like this conversation and
Mhm.
also online. And so that is incredibly frustrating and feels like a tremendous violation.
Mhm.
So I encourage everyone to go to a website called Writers Beware, which is where the most up to date author scams are often talked about, promoted, and shared, so you can have that
Mhm.
information. In terms of authorship, I don't represent clients that use AI to generate material. Some use it for research or as part of like their toolbox, but not for generating creative writing or material.
Mhm.
And so I'm personally against that. And then lastly, though I'm sure there are some proposals that may be getting through that might have AI as part of them, it's usually pretty easy for me to tell when someone's querying me using AI because the first line of their query letter is exactly the same as everyone else that's using that line. And it's aiming to be hyper personalized, but it reads as incredibly generic and you get an automatic pass from me when you do that. So my
Wow.
advice is like maybe use it as a tool and stay nimble, but don't use it to think for you or write for you if you want to author your own book, especially if you want to work with a literary agent.
I would say that that's the red flag, guys. And I'm going to go into my next question. I have a little lightning round before we end.
Sure.
What's your biggest green flag of a pitch?
It's a gut feeling. I get that sparkle. It's hard to
Mhm.
describe, which I know is frustrating for people to hear because you're like, I want to have that sparkle. But the thing is, like, it's about finding the right fit with an agent. It's not about finding any agent. And so for me, the green flag is when the voice is there, the topic is of interest to me personally, and I can see where and how you fit into authorship, and you need an agent to help you get there, and you're working from a really collaborative space. And there's little vocabulary choices or turns of phrases in somebody's query that helps tell me that they're ready. And often it's going from that sort of air of desperation to definitive distinctness. And when you're on that definitive distinct side, you're ready for the green flag.
I love that. See, for me, a green flag in the cookbooking space would be anyone who's offering gluten free.
We got to talk about gluten free stuff. Are you totally gluten free?
My son has celiac.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I've been gluten free for
Yeah.
over 20 years.
What?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah,
Not
so I just
celiac,
started
but
talking about it. I went to Mom 2.0, was looking for gluten-free products because medications are hard, food's
yes.
hard. So yeah, that would give me the green flag. I'd be like, "Oh, yes."
I was just talking about gluten-free stuff yesterday actually with a prospective client. I've got a bakery to send you to as
Oh,
well.
good.
16 mil out of New York. I think they do mail order. It's so
Ooh.
good.
I love
The
it. I'm
the
always
buoyancy of their ciabatta roll is the stuff of dreams.
Yeah, I love that. We had a pizza the other day. It was gluten-free, like freezer. And my son's like, nah, mom, I don't want it. And then it came out and it was thick. And he was like,
Ooh.
oh, like that looks good. I was like,
Yeah.
so it
Oh,
really does make a
yeah.
difference.
Mhm.
Okay, so one book you've represented that you're so proud of. You only can pick one.
That is such an unfair question.
All right, fine. You can pick more than one.
Can I pick all of them? I mean,
All of them.
it's truly for different reasons.
Mm,
Today is a day that I am celebrating the publication of the Lao Kitchen.
uh-huh.
And so I will share that book because it's
Yes.
also on my Substack. And I did a behind the scenes of how that book deal came to be because every book, there's the science and art of book publishing.
Mhm.
And the science is the proposal and the voice and the platform and the concept, but the art is the special sauce. And so that book is one of many that are near and dear to my heart. It's the first time there's been a modern Lao cookbook in a really long time. And Sang has a really beautiful and robust community online. So it has the topic, it has the voice, and it has the platform to back it up.
Mhm.
And it's a great example of someone doing the work online, was discovered by an editor, Zoe Brandt at 10 Speed, and she knew me and my style, and her team knows me. And so they said, this is someone we have our eye on. They need a helping hand on the proposal. Would you like an intro? And that's how that book came to be. And there's more info on in the
Yeah, you
newsletter
guys have
today.
to check out the Substack. It's really detailed. And, I have to ask this because I really don't think we hit it. What exactly does a literary agent do for an author?
What don't we do? No.
Exactly, but
A literary agent is an author's representative pitching them and negotiating book publishing contracts to publishers. So my clients are authors. It's a commission based relationship, 15% commission off of the advance and royalties earned for the life of a project. That is what I do logistically, but really what an agent does is act as an author advocate, a champion, a sounding board, a listening ear, a taskmaster, a reality check, a co-conspirator, a celebrator, and, the list goes on.
and the connector.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. That's my favorite part is the connecting.
Mm. Well, I'm really glad we got to connect.
Me
And
too.
everyone who's listening, I really hope you check out the links in the description, visit her Substack. And again, if you have questions, she says you may reach out. So I'm
I
not
am
telling you to reach out.
Yeah, no, I'm here. You can find me online and through the newsletter community. And if there's specific information that your listeners are curious about, I reply to the emails and messages that my readers send me. So send me a message, and if I've written a post about it, I'll send it over to you.
Thanks so much. I'm really glad we got to do this.
Me too. Thanks, Jamie.